Hello, and welcome to Optics, the featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. I'm Crista Dix, the Executive Director of the Griffin Museum of Photography, and we are thrilled that you've joined us today to hear from our featured artist here at WinCAM. The Griffin Museum is based in Winchester with a satellite here at WinCAM. Today's featured artist is Jürgen Lobert. Jürgen is a Massachusetts-based fine art photographer born and raised in Germany. He received a PhD in atmospheric chemistry from Gutenberg University in Mainz before moving to the US in 1991. He is a self-taught photographer who specializes in night photography and daytime long exposure, as well as urban exploration and infrared photography, and he shares his love of the craft working as a fine artist, lecturer, and educator. Today he joins us to discuss his exhibition, Infralucent Clouds. Welcome, Jürgen.
Thanks, Krista, for having me. It's exciting.
Tell us a little bit about Infralucent Clouds.
So the show Infralucent Clouds, I made up the name, and infralucent means infrared and shining. Lucent means shining in Latin. So I'm showing clouds that are only visible at night and only in infrared. You cannot see them with your naked eye, and you cannot see them with a normal camera. You have to have a special camera, infrared converted camera, to see them. And it's a new discovery that I found in July last year, actually. I went to a park on the North Shore and took my infrared camera along just to see what I'm going to get. And fair enough, I saw something, what is that in the sky? And then I explored a little more and I figured out this is something I cannot see with my normal camera. So I looked it up and tried to find if anybody else has seen it, and it is not. So it is something unique that I discovered, and I came up with the name Infralucent Clouds. So there is a phenomenon called Noctilucent Clouds. Clouds that you can see only at night at a certain angle of the sun below the horizon. And they named them Noctilucent. They shine only at night, but those are clouds that are only visible towards the north, the poles. And that's not the same as the clouds that I discovered, but I used that name to get inspired about making my own name, Infralucent Clouds. And that is what I'm showing with the exhibit.
Got it. So talk a little bit about your background in science and how that led you to this body of work, or to how you see photography.
So my background, I have a PhD in chemistry, and specifically atmospheric chemistry. The work that I do doesn't really inspire me to do my work other than wanting to go out afterwards. But there are two aspects to that. One is that I'm a very technical person, so my background is very technical. And I think that is also the approach that I took to photography. So there is that curiosity that I've learned to groom, always questioning everything, always asking, how does that work? Why do people do it this way? Why do they use these settings? Why not do it that way, which seems more logical? So I'm trying to understand everything, and I think that is why I mastered the technical aspects of night photography fairly well, and fairly quickly also, and then embraced it and started teaching it. But the other aspect, of course, is, and what I meant to say is that you have to have that little bit of technical expertise for photography to do that kind of work. So this is much beyond a snapshot that you can take with any camera. You really have to methodically approach it. It's a very slow kind of photography where you need to think, what am I doing, how am I doing it, and then execute on that. The other aspect is that the atmospheric chemistry background. That is my degree, basically. So my degree was in chemistry of the atmosphere, trying to figure out what is going on with the gases, ozone depletion, global warming, that kind of stuff. But of course, the sky has a lot of phenomena that are interesting to see, and that is what we capture with night photography. So there is that subgenre of night photography that is called astral landscape photography. So we're imaging a landscape in the foreground, and then there is an astral portion, a sky portion to it. And there are a lot of phenomena that you can see, like the aurora, for example, the northern lights, or air glow, or light pillars, and then of course the moon, the stars, and all of that. So being a scientist puts me in a unique position to not only have the knowledge to explain everything and know what I'm looking at, but also to enjoy it from an artistic perspective, you know, and then to capture it properly so that I can share it with everybody.
So how did you find your first location? When you went out to shoot, how did you connect to that first space?
So that was really a little bit of an afterthought. I'm going out to do night photography with a few friends of mine. We have a group of 4 people. We often go out, and one of us selected that location on the North Shore, and it is the image, the galactic tree, which is in the exhibit, and that is from that first night. And also the last image, the panorama with the Milky Way. So I just took my infrared camera with me. It was not meant to be a special location, really. It's just something that we haven't been to. We wanted to scout it out and see what we get. There was a lot of urban glow from Boston, but also a dark sky portion with the Milky Way in it. And I just took out my infrared camera, and I had tried that before, infrared at night. Which is quite challenging, and I was never very successful in doing it. So I wanted to try it again and put a different filter on, and fair enough, there was something in the sky. What is that? What are those clouds? I don't see those. I didn't see them in the other camera. And then I panned a little to the left and a little further left, and they got stronger and stronger. And I did a panorama, which is the last image in the show, and to show not only the urban glow from Boston and the Milky Way, but those really strong clouds coming right at you. That's how I discovered it. So the location was not meant to be special. It was really an afterthought of doing infrared there, but I'm glad I did.
So talk to me about the difference between day infrared and night infrared.
Okay, so daytime infrared is actually a fairly popular discipline. A lot of people do it. You can convert your camera, or you can just use an infrared filter and take a photo of whatever you want. And infrared photos don't capture the visible light that we are used to, all of the colors that we are known. But it converts the colors also. So the foliage on trees has the property to reflect infrared light, and that makes them look white. So they are no longer green, they're actually really white. And the blue sky, which is very cold, appears black almost, you know. So you get these very stark black and white images. That's a very popular thing, and that is the historic way of doing infrared. Over the last 20 years or so, as digital cameras have come up, we do color infrared photography. So now we're looking at false colors. No color in the image is what you really see with your eyes. So it's the conversion. An infrared photo out of camera is all red, and you have to process it to make it look the way you want it to look. So all of the colors are false colors. It's very easy to do that during the day because the exposures are very short. You can do it handheld with a normal camera, but when you go into the night photography is dealing with very low light levels. So at night we have 16 stops, 16 exposure stops, less light than during the day. That means at night we have only 0.0004015% of the light that we have during the day. Now, if you use infrared at night, you're cutting out half of the visible light. You only want the infrared portion, so you're losing another stop. Now it's 17 stops. Now you have 5 zeros. So it becomes very challenging to do that, and you can no longer do that handheld. You have to have a tripod and do long exposures. And if you want to image the night sky like I do in my exhibit, where you have star points and not star trails, you are limited to 10 or 20 seconds of exposure time. So you have to shoot at fairly high ISO sensitivity of the sensor. You have to work with very fast lenses. So that is perhaps one of the photography disciplines where good quality and expensive equipment does make a difference. You know?
So I can't go out and shoot that with my phone?
Not with your phone, no. Not yet.
Not yet.
The iPhone 25 might be able to do it.
All right. I'll keep that in mind. So how long are your trips out to take these photos, and how many photos do you get in an evening?
Not counting the trips to Singapore, but if I go out, usually it's 2 or 3 hours that I go out. That's about as much as I can take before it either gets too cold or too boring or too hot. And in most cases, it's a good time span to be out and about and then wrap it up. So I organize photo shoots for other people through my meetup group, and those are typically also 2 or 3 hours long. That's about how long people want to be out, and I find that for myself true as well.
So do you follow star charts or moon rise and moon set? How do you determine what is the right time to go out and get these photos?
So my infralucent clouds are taken on moonless nights, so it needs to be as dark as possible because that makes them shine more brightly. I have taken a few photos during almost full moon. Actually, one of them is in the exhibit, but you see them better at the dark evenings. So. I look at the calendar when is there no moon outside, and then I look at the weather chart. Is it going to be clear? Because regular clouds that we see will obstruct it. So it needs to be a clear night, and then I choose a location to go out. If I do regular night photography, you mentioned the moonrise or the moonset, that is a very popular object to shoot. Mm-hmm. There's actually an app for the phone available, PhotoPills and TPE and Planet Pro. Apps that tell you when is the moon coming over the horizon, where is it coming over the horizon, and where do I have to stand to have, let's say, the airport tower in Boston right in front of the moon when it comes up. So you can plan that with much detail. It's becoming pretty popular to do that, actually.
Interesting. So how many people do you go out and photograph with?
So I mentioned the group of friends that I have. We're 4 friends, and it could be just 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. We go out, and that is a private group. But then I also mentioned that I organize photo shoots for other people. I have a meetup group, the Greater Boston Night Photographers, and I plan photo shoots, and I have a few other organizers who also plan those, and we just post them online. People sign up, and it's typically 10, 15 people, sometimes only 5, but I'd like to cap it at 15. I've had as many as 25, but it gets a little unwieldy, and people are in each other way. So
I was going to say, that sounds a little noisy, and I think for me, when I look at these images, I find this beautiful sense of peace and beautiful sense of quiet. So how do you find that in that group of people, or do you spend more time going out by yourself without that group in order to catch these?
So that's interesting that you say that, because I always introduce night photography as being very peaceful, very serene, if you don't get caught by somebody trespassing.
Well, I think that's a story for another time.
But the movement of the clouds, the water smoothing over, all of that creates very serene sceneries, and that is just a natural outcome of the photo. So even if 100 people behind you were yelling, the photo would still look very peaceful. And in fact, you make people disappear, because if you take a 4-minute photo, somebody walks through that photo, they don't register, right? Because it's just not enough light on them. But in terms of going out with groups, the groups tend to spread out. So yes, we meet at one point and everybody says hello, and then we'll talk about what to do that evening. But then everybody goes about their way. But we are sort of in walking distance to each other. So for a lot of people, the safety in numbers is a desirable element of that. But of course, you get less of that if you go out with 1 or 2 or 3 friends, and I'd say maybe 20% of the time I go out alone.
Is that something that is enjoyable to you, to be by yourself after working with your students or going out with friends?
Very much so. I don't mind being out there alone. I find it very peaceful, and if I take 4, 8, 15-minute photos, maybe wait for a 30-minute star trail, all you can do is wait. So I lie down, I look at the stars, and enjoy myself. You know. And I found that I even feel safe in cities and dark spaces in cities. I usually don't do urban exploration, abandoned structures alone. I usually go with a friend, but I have done that alone too. You know. And there's only one occasion where that paradigm changed. I was in San Francisco in the middle of the city, in the middle of this financial district, which is hustling and bustling during the day, but at night it's pretty empty. And I got mugged. So there were 3 young punks coming, one pushed me away, one grabbed my camera. I held on to the tripod, but the camera ripped off.
Oh, no.
That wasn't supposed to happen. And I look at that and, oh, hell no. And I chased them for like 10 minutes or so, ran after them. But they were like 18-year-old punks. So anyway, that incident did a little trick on my mind. So I actually went out alone to do Infralucent Clouds at a pond nearby. And I didn't feel safe, even though I was out there completely alone. Logic told me there's nobody within a mile around me. Every little sound that I heard around me startled me. And so that did a little trick on that self-confidence, but I got over that. I'm out alone again, and it feels good. I like it.
So one of the things that I love about your work is the level of detail. I see the detail of the bark or the light reflecting off of the trees. How do you see that in the dark with your camera? Since the camera sees very differently than our eyes see, how do you know what you're going to find?
Yeah, the camera is much superior in how much it can see because you integrate light over time by taking a long exposure. It becomes as bright as you want it. You can make it look like daylight, right? And your eyes don't see that. So there are a number of tricks. You can crank up the sensitivity of your sensor and look through it, and it gets fairly bright even in complete darkness. You can take a flashlight and shine that around. What is my composition? Is there any branch sticking in or so? You can avoid that. And then you take a test shot, which is at very high sensitivity, just a few seconds to see, okay, this is going to be my composition. I'm going to go a little to the right. The leading line is a little better. So you fine tune it with test shots, and they are very short, 5-10 seconds or so. And then you take the photo. But much of that detail is also in post-processing, and some of that detail is only possible through long exposure. So you mentioned the reflections of the stars in the water. Mm-hmm. You get that only if the water is really still, and long exposure smooths out the water, makes it like a mirror finish. And you can even sometimes make it reflect the Milky Way, which is so dim that we can barely see it with our eyes, right? But the other part is in post-processing that I process the foreground differently from the water, differently from the sky, and bring out the details, reduce the noise, and as I want it to be. And then the last tool that you have is light painting. Even though it is very dark, you can take a flashlight, come out from behind your camera, and then light paint the foreground, put a little spot where you want to emphasize something and so on. So there are a number of ways to do it.
So that leads me to the element of surprise. How often are you surprised by the things that you think you've planned for but then get in that image? And are they gifts or are they problems?
They can be both, but I think much of it is chance. So I have a number of photos where I have a bright meteor coming right through the image, perfectly composed. It's not cut off at the edges. It's just dumb luck that you get that, because you can't plan for a meteor.
I was going to say meteor are like fish, and if you try to photograph a fish, they always go in a different direction.
Right.
Right? So.
And I have seen many, many really bright meteors which were there, and my camera was pointing this way. Oh. So that happens too, of course. You know. Negative experiences, sometimes you start a photo and a car comes around the corner and ruins it with a headlight, so you have to take it again, yeah, and again and again. I was just in Iceland last September trying to shoot the aurora, very faint aurora with Kirkjufell, the iconic mountain, but there's a road going through. So I had to time it between cars, basically, and if there were no cars, there were other unruly night photographers shining their lights around. So it took me like 7 or 8 attempts to get the shot that I really wanted.
Well, that's persistence, though,
But
right?
then in other cases, you go to a location that you think is going to be okay, mundane or so. You shoot something and suddenly you see something that you haven't seen with your eyes, because the camera shows you more of it. Oh, that looks really interesting. So you nudge it a little forward to emphasize that. So you find something while you shoot, while you're out there. And if I'm waiting for my 4-minute exposure to finish, I do walk around and look around. Is there a better viewpoint? Is there something else that I wasn't aware of that I can shoot?
So you spend a lot of time out in the wilds. Why do we not see animals in your images?
Well, long exposures make everything that moves through disappear, so you don't see animals, right? But they can be around, of course. I remember one night in World's End, and a deer jumped out of the woods. It was probably scared of me, and it startled me, but I startled it. But it doesn't happen often. I heard stories of a group when they went out with a different organizer where they heard coyotes howling, and some people got really scared and left the scenery.
Now that sounds like music to me.
Yeah, well, I always tell people, you have a tripod. That tripod is a really good weapon. You can keep people away from you, or animals, or you can whack them, if needed. I mean, it's an extreme measure, but...
So once the bear shows up, I know to bring my tripod and whack it with a tripod, because a bear bell just doesn't hold up.
Hold it right there.
Yep. So talk to me a little bit about post-processing. How much work goes into the images once you've captured them?
It depends a little bit. So if you do cityscapes, you're in the middle of the city at night, you have a lot of artificial lights, everything is nice and bright. Yes, you do have a big dynamic range. That's why we shoot in raw file format, to handle that dynamic range from the really bright lights to the deep shadows. But you often get scenes that you can use almost straight out of camera, right? You tweak it a little bit, maybe a little contrast, a little sharpness, and that's it. The other extreme is my exhibit, Infralucent Clouds. Those images come out of the camera completely red. There's no detail, and it's a very flat light scenery. So there isn't much contrast, there is no direct light, unless I apply it with my flashlight. I told you that it's during moonless nights, so I don't have the moonlight either. It's really just the Milky Way and the stars, right? So they need a lot of post-processing. So first you apply a specific profile that enables you to set a white balance, and then you pick a neutral point, and I usually start with the sky to be the neutral point. I want the sky to be neutral gray, which is what it should be, really. But then the foreground becomes dark blue. So your foliage isn't blue, so you have to do something about that, right? So then I process the sky, I remove the noise, and give the stars a little bit of sharpness and dehaze. And then if there's any water in the composition, I smooth that out with a special filter. I reduce the texture, reduce the noise, and make it really smooth. And then I process the foreground, the foliage or the rocks, whatever might be there, give it a different white balance so it's not stark blue anymore, right? And you'll see that if you go into the exhibit. It's all false color, so it's not how we see things, but I hope I made it look intriguing with the way I process it. But you do need quite a bit of processing in post.
So from conception to photographing the image to post-production to print, about how long does one of those images live through that transition?
Well, taking the image is anywhere between 15 seconds and 60 minutes.
Plus travel time.
Yeah, not counting the travel time and being on site, of course, yes. Post-processing, again, depends largely on what I'm shooting. If I go into the city and take maybe 60, 80 photos, I can process these in an hour flat, and then I'm done. I export the images. and post them on social media, and then whatever time you need to make an actual print out of it, that's another half hour or so, an hour. For Infralucent Clouds, it's more like 20-30 minutes per image. So it's a very different.
So we're talking days, not minutes. Again, for those of us that are amateurs,
Right.
we can't just go out, shoot it with the phone, and then press print. There's
Right.
there's a little bit of time and attention
Absolutely.
put into those.
And if you want to print those, you have to have a good calibrated printer, of course. You do need to make a test print. It never comes out the way you want to see it or you want it, right?
Well,
And
especially with your color palette, because
Right.
your color palette is so unique because of the infrared.
which gives you a little bit of latitude. So if one of those false color images doesn't come out quite as you expected, it's still going to be false color. So you don't have to match an absolute standard where the sky is blue and the foliage is green, right? So you have a little bit of freedom there. It doesn't matter if it's exactly matched, it's still going to look very interesting. But yeah, you do want it to come out the way you had it envisioned. And making metal prints, for example, you always have to have a test print, see how that comes out.
So tell us, is there anything else that we should know about you, about Infralucent Clouds, about your work?
Okay, so maybe one of the things that inspires me from where I came learning night photography 11 years ago now. Initially, there was a test phase where I just got better, learning phase, then an exploratory phase where I tried out everything, and then started teaching actually. So I started to teach at camera clubs in my meetup group, at conferences, and then later at the New England School of Photography, and now of course at the Griffin Museum. And part of that is also the writing, that I like to write about what I do. I explained initially my technical background, trying to understand everything, learn everything down to the basics. Why is it that way? And I think the end goal of that is to be able to disseminate that knowledge and teach somebody or write about it, let people learn about it.
So education is your inspiration.
Say that again?
Education is your inspiration in many ways.
A part of it, for sure, yeah. Also sharing my artwork, of course, and let people simply enjoy it. That is a big part of it as well, of course, yeah.
So tell me, what's next for you?
A lot of things. I try to stay open-minded and let life lead me in certain directions. I think one decision I made is that I do not want to lock on to one particular topic. A lot of famous artists, Ansel Adams, Henri Cartier-Bresson, or Michael Kenner, they're known for what they do, and that is one style, one kind of topic. And I think I do not want to do that. There's so much interesting stuff in night photography, so many subgenres in night photography, and I enjoy all of them. So I would like to keep pursuing all of them. But I think I've come from that learning phase, exploratory phase, more to a point where I don't randomly throw things around, but work more in terms of projects. So I have different portfolios like Infralucent Clouds. I'm going to build on that. The next step for that particular project is to find more interesting foregrounds. So this exhibit is very specifically by design made so that the sky portion, the clouds, are the main emphasis. It's 2/3 of the image, or maybe half of the image. And the foreground is not as interesting as the sky, because I wanted to keep the attention on the sky. But I think going forward, I'd like to apply my usual discipline, where the sky portion is really just the gravy on top. It's not the main meal, right? So I want a really interesting foreground with leading lines, and then the sky with the infralucent clouds being part of that composition. I think it makes for more impact and a more intriguing photo in general. But I'd like to continue doing multiple disciplines and see where I can go with it.
So I forgot to ask, what is your favorite image in this show?
I have two. The galactic tree is one of them, and the island is the other one.
Why? What is it about those two?
I think for the galactic tree, it's the color palette and the impact. You see the glow of Boston from the right, and the Milky Way and the dark sky on the left with the infralucent clouds, and this lonely tree right in the middle. So composition, the color palette. For the island, I think it's the mood, the emotion. It's the little island in the middle of a big pond, and it has this glow behind it from city lights, but also from the infralucent clouds. So it's just the emotional connection to it.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your creativity and for sharing your work with us. We look forward to seeing what's next for you. And we hope that you will enjoy what's left of the exhibition. And I'm rambling, and so can I do that part over? Thank you so much for sharing your creativity and your work with us. Thank you to WinCAM for hosting us. And I hope that we can join each other out in the night sky sometime soon.
And thank you for having me. I'm very excited about the exhibit, about the project, and I love the interview. Want to see
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Optics, the featured artist in the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM. Infralucent Clouds is on the walls of WinCAM through April 29th and is free and open to the public during WinCAM's regular hours of operation. WinCAM is located at 32 Swanton Street here in Winchester. For more information on the Griffin Gallery at WinCAM or other programs offered at either the Griffin Museum or WinCAM, log on to our website at griffinmuseum.org. Thank you so much for watching.